Alright fellas, so for today's video I have this Blue Point air ratchet. Model number is AT713, and what I presume to be the serial number at the bottom. So this is a Blue Point, of course, which is owned by Snap-on. Interesting thing about these is they're not actually made by Snap-on or even Blue Point for that matter. Snap-on contracts these out, but I'm almost positive it's not actually a Snap-on made product. They just put their label on it. But anyways, so this is a coworker's tool and it's in need of some service. What I have here is an exploded parts diagram with some part numbers of anything I may need to get this thing working again. So what's happening is he's having a loss of torque issue and it's wanting to jam up on him. There also could be the air motor, which is a cylinder, and I'll hopefully can show you guys that. It's a little cylinder about yay big and it's got a bunch of air veins in it. We'll also inspect the trigger valve here, see what kind of shape that's in, and see if we can clean everything up. So first things first, I'll show you guys how to undo the head. And it kind of goes without saying that all of this is going to be cleaned up. Okay, retaining washer, set that aside. Now this is probably going to need a little bit of help getting that out. So I just put it into the neutral position and I'm going to give it a few taps with a small hammer. So with a couple quick taps of the hammer, and very carefully so it doesn't fly all over the place, your anvil and pawl comes out as one unit. Then you also have these two little springs, these two little plungers that go right in here, your seal, and then of course this little guy right here. So you guys saw how dirty all that was, and it's just as bad inside this thing. So I'm going to do my best to clean this out, but first we're going to go ahead and separate this as well and clean out the whole rest of the unit. And so here we are. This is all you do. Now I did elect to wrap a rag around the shaft just so it wouldn't get damaged. That's all it takes. So then you can unscrew it. And before I get too far ahead of myself, we're going to remove this now that I broke the tension on here. So back at the workbench, and this just unscrews like this. There you have it. So you guys can kind of see how this thing works. Then this is a reduction drive. These little gears, you want to inspect all the teeth on these, make sure they're okay. Then you have, if I can even get this out, the air motors inside here. So what I'm actually going to use to clean all this is WD-40 and a rag. And then we'll see if we can tear this apart. This might be a little bit more difficult. The first thing we'll need to do is, of course, take all of this apart, clean it up, inspect it, and make sure it's all good to go. And the thing you want to look at, mainly like with the reduction drive gear set, you want to check all of the splines all over this thing and just make sure it's all in good condition. So what we're going to do right now is give it a WD-40 bath. And it's really simple, not really too much involved here, but I'm just going to let it soak in some WD-40. WD-40 is a pretty good degreaser. It's pretty benign. It doesn't really hurt anything. Purple Power is also pretty good as well, as long as you take it off. But like I said, when you clean all this up, you can really inspect everything and you know, kind of more or less just check and see what kind of shape everything's in. Alright, so managed to clean everything out, and I'm just now going back together with everything. I stuck the shaft back in. Rotate it down. So here is the splines on the head, and very carefully and that's been reinstalled. So we're just going to make sure that this thing is still working, and it is. Alright, so now we're on to the meat and potatoes of this thing. Alright, so now putting the gear reduction back in, I inspected all the gears, and this very carefully. You always want to make sure that seal, it's basically just a big washer, it goes around the outer race of the bearing. You want to make sure that goes back in. Okay, so the reduction gear set's back in place. All the rest of this stuff goes to the top of the head, and just for now I'm going to reinsert everything kind of into place here, just so we don't really lose anything. Now on to the head. The head's kind of important. You do want to make sure that this is cleaned out, and I've pretty well cleaned it out. It's not really going to be any issue for us, but there's also these two dowel pins that go into it. And you want to be really careful, but you want to make sure it's set to the neutral position, because if it's set to either tighten or loosen, it's not going to let you reinstall it. So set it to neutral, throw it back in. Okay. So now we're back in place, and you're going to have to reinstall your springs, which these can definitely be difficult. You want to take your time. Alright, there's the springs. And then you just grab your top seal. So now we can reinstall the snap ring, which, because of the way this thing is designed, you have those two pins that are putting pressure against this seal, or plate, or whatever you want to call it. So what you have to do is kind of find a happy medium and press everything back into place. It's not the easiest thing to do. But it can be done. Just like that. Well, so unfortunately, I don't think this is the culprit. Seems to be working okay. And I just put everything back together just to see what it was actually doing. Now that I had everything cleaned up to, you know, kind of have a better look at things, and as soon as I pulled the air motor out, I noticed something that's probably causing the issue. This thing is very worn out. The color difference that you're seeing here, that's not grease, that's not oil, that's material that's been worn down from the inside of this thing. So what I think is happening is this thing is locking up and not getting the required amount of pressure, to drive this thing, and I even tried it on these bolts for my vise a little bit just to see what it would do. And after cleaning everything out, oiling everything up, it made it a little bit better, but it's definitely worn out. So I'm going to have to advise him that if he can even find one of these, to just go ahead and replace it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I definitely apologize that we weren't able to get some good news out of this, but hey, 10 years definitely lasted the guy a while, so I can't fault it too much. Stay tuned for more, boys. You all stay classy.